Shane Ehrsam, thank you for joining me today on Acquiring Minds.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here. Listened to a lot of your episodes, and I think you're doing a great thing for the space.
Appreciate that, sir. Shane, you were serious in your search. You were organized and committed and full-time, and you found a good business to buy in 6 months' time. So a great acquisition in 6 months. It's really what searchers set out to do, but few accomplish it. So we are going to hear how you did so. Start us off, Shane, with your background. Start us wherever you think is relevant to this story.
Okay. Yeah. Happy to do so. Yeah. I would say I bought a great business, but I'm certainly partial. Yeah, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father still owns, after 26 years, a successful home care franchise where I grew up in the Southwest. And he's actually kind of entering into that stage where a lot of searchers are looking for. He's planning on retiring in the near future and kind of trying to set up his exit process. But nonetheless, grew up with my dad as a father figure and as a real mentor, real hero of mine. And a lot of that was more about how much he prioritized my sister and I, our family, the flexibility that came with him being a business owner. And that really kind of gave me inspiration that this is the lifestyle that I want to have at some point. My father is very humble in what his desires and material goals were. I would say I'm a little bit more money motivated than he ever was. But I saw that the success that he had with the franchise, and most importantly, the flexibility they gave him, was really what inspired me. So going into college, I studied entrepreneurial management and marketing. I knew exactly what I wanted to do at some point in my life. I never had a great startup idea. I never really thought that a startup was kind of my direction. I guess having seen my father have success with the franchise model, I kind of always just assumed that was probably be the direction I would go. But after college, I knew I had to get out in the working world, cut my chops, and learn the skills and leadership necessary to hopefully one day own my own business. And so that's what I did. And I was attracted to jobs that provided me to be in management at a young age. Ultimately ended up with a company, was there for 11 years in ascending leadership roles, and managed a team as large as 750 people, P&L over 120 million. Really had a lot of success with that company. It was a great career, but ultimately towards the end there, was really pretty unhappy and really started to think about, I'm already into my mid 30s. If I don't make this business ownership thing happen, when is that going to happen? And of course, the longer you work at a company, the higher you go, the harder it is to leave. The quote unquote golden handcuffs were very much real. But it was always in the back of my head. And so fast forward to September of 21. Like I said, I was already kind of thinking about moving on, but they made that choice for me. And I was ultimately laid off due to a restructuring. And, that ultimately ended up being the best decision that ever happened and the best thing that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm. During these years as a W-2 young manager and growing at this company, were you talking with your father about your entrepreneurial aspirations? Is this an ongoing conversation that you guys have, or is it more just like you watching him and kind of quietly seeking to emulate him at some point?
Yeah, it's a good question. At first it was just, I was very focused on just doing as well in that position as I could. And especially right after school, the first probably 4 or 5 years, and I was very motivated to get promoted. The accolades, the promotions, the additional compensation, those were all what kind of kept me driving forward. And but I remember very specifically when my father and I went on a vacation together with my sister, we had a lot of long conversations about, is this truly what I want to be doing? Am I happy doing what I'm doing? And when you're forced to really be that introspective and really kind of think about what the heart wants, I realized it wasn't. But again, I was doing well. It was hard to leave. We were comfortable. And so, I would say that it was always gnawing at the back of me, back of my head, but it wasn't something that I spent a lot of time thinking about, because I think the more I thought about it, the more I realized I was unhappy in what I was doing, or not truly fulfilled, I should say. But all of the pressures of the world of, the mortgage and the lifestyle and everything else just made it, hard to think about taking that leap.
Sure. And so you have a family, your own family?
I'm married, no kids. Hopefully God blesses us with children in the near future. But I am married.
Okay. So you said you were laid off from the business where you'd worked for over a decade in 2021. What month was that? Did you say?
September 1st of 21.
Okay, September 1st, 2021. So just about a year ago. And so it's the best thing that ever happens to you, because it has now set you on this path. How did you, tell us about the actual decision to not re-enter the workforce or not go get another W-2 and in fact become an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So my dad had actually sent me the Harvard business book, Buying a Small Business, which I'm sure your listeners are very familiar with, back in 2018. And I had actually started to read that and was really, kind of blown away by some of the success stories that are, shown in that book. Really thought this seems like a better path. Ironically, the same vacation that I was reading the book on, I ended up getting a call that promoted me and brought me from the East Coast back to Texas, which is where I ultimately wanted to be. And so I just stopped reading the book right at that point, because had gotten this promotion that had long been sought after, was getting relocated back to the area that I wanted to live in. So I was happy and I was focused on that next role. So once I was ultimately laid off, after a week or so of letting the sting kind of, come off, I started to think about what is it that I want to do. And, I polished up my resume, just the natural things that you would do when you've just been laid off. And so, but I had that book and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to open this thing back up. I'm going to reread it from the beginning. And that propelled me to spend more time on Search Funder, and was just, every day getting on Search Funder, watching interviews, watching, speakers, reading different resources that website makes available. And then I started to network with different searchers as well. And that was what really kind of, the more I read about it, the more I saw, the more I was like, this is the right path for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, a month or two later, you decide that you're going to do this thing?
Well, so kind of at the same time I'm researching the world of search, I'm also talking to a number of different franchise brokers. That had always kind of been what I thought the direction that business ownership would, or what it would look like for me. So, I spoke to probably 12 different franchise networks, a lot of really good ones, but ultimately they all wanted me to start a territory from scratch, with X amount of dollars as an investment, and, no real confirmed time frame as to when I'm going to be able to start paying myself a paycheck. And no matter how great the upside was for some of these new territories and new franchise opportunities, I just kept coming back to the idea that why do that when I can buy a business that already has cash flow? If I buy the right business, I can pay myself a salary, hopefully close to what I was making prior, or at least something. And I've already got all the infrastructure built in. I've already got all the employees. I've got product market fit. That just made too much sense to me. And so I kind of stopped my conversations with the franchisees. And I would say, if you have a resale, I'm open to that, but here's the size of business that I'm looking for. And those types of franchise resales are few and far between. And so they'd all kind of say, well, it's not really realistic. And I said, well, I know they're out there. They might be few and far between, but this is what I'm looking for. And I'm not going to settle for something smaller. And that's when I really kind of pushed aside the franchise opportunity, unless they came back to me with an attractive resale. And I decided that the search was the way I was going to go.
And why is it unrealistic? Why did they set your expectations low that a resale opportunity might come along?
Just due to the size and financials that I was looking for. Initially I kind of defined my search criteria as an earnings range between 400 and 750,000. And there are certainly a lot of franchisees, especially franchisees that have multiple territories in different franchise networks that do that. But those are not typically what resales come up within the network, is my understanding. There a lot of them are sub 100,000, sub 200,000 opportunities, and I just knew that wasn't what I was looking for.
Okay, so you consider doing a franchise, which is what your father had done. And by the way, a point on him. It wasn't, I guess, just that one conversation when you were on vacation, you and him and your sister. He'd also been kind of planting seeds for years if he gave you the Harvard Business Review book back in 2018.
Yeah, he did. And, certainly there was many, many times we've talked about what does the succession of his business look like? And do my sister and I fit into that? Where do we fit into that? And we have both toyed quite a lot with just kind of naturally rolling the business over to my sister and I. And it would be a great business to run and to have. But for a number of different reasons, it just didn't seem to be the right fit at the time. And of course, people might ask, well, why didn't you offer to buy your father's business? And ultimately, I was very happy. We live in Dallas. My wife and I like where we live. Was not interested in moving home. And ultimately just thought that my dad could have more success kind of getting the exit that he's looking for by pursuing that path. And his franchise also happens to be kind of at a crossroads where the franchisor has been acquired by a VC-backed company. And so there's some uncertainty there as far as exactly what the new model is going to look like and how do some of these legacy franchisees fit into that. So that kind of gave me pause.
Okay. Well, having explored a number of different options, you arrive at buying an independent small business as the path forward. So now we're in late 2021. And what is your first step?
Yeah. So just taking advantage of the free resources, online search funder, got the Buy the Build book, read that, and just, was listening to podcasts, reading articles, and was given advice to network with searchers and try to talk to at least 20 or as many as I could to really determine, am I committed to this path? Is this what I want to do? And I thought that was great advice. So began reaching out to Texas-based searchers on Search Funder, and was given the advice by one of the searchers that I talked to that the best thing that they had done for their search was to join the Acquisition Lab, which I know is one of your sponsors. And so I'm not paid to say any of the things I say about Acquisition Lab, but I can 100% confirm what that searcher had said. That was the best thing that happened for my search and was really what helped kind of propel me from learning about search to actually conducting a search. And so I joined the Acquisition Lab in November of 21, was part of cohort 15. And, again, I'm full-time searching. Most of the folks in the lab are not full-time at the time that they join the lab. But I was like, hey, I know that my severance is going to run out at some point, and I got to get income. I got to propel this search forward as fast as I can. And so I was very hungry to learn as much as I could to really soak up the information and education that's provided through the Acquisition Lab and as fast as I could, and to get to that point where I was ready to launch my search. And so the 4 weeks intensive, as they call it, really helped me kind of finalize what get me a lot more educated about how to properly conduct a search, and would have been ready to launch right at the end of November, beginning of December. But with the holidays, we had a Christmas vacation plan with family. I didn't quite do a full-blown launch. I really kind of did the last few steps of finishing up my website, clarifying my target statement. And I began, where a lot of people began, is just cruising best biz buy sell, and ultimately found a couple opportunities during the month of December that were interesting, and had a number of my first seller conversations, but didn't officially launch, meaning a full-blown broker outreach until January 1.
Yeah, and elaborate a little bit on what you mean by launch. You just said full-blown broker outreach, but elaborate a little bit more on like what pieces you had in place, and then what that first step or two looked like when you launched.
Yeah. So number one, I chose that I wanted to focus on broker outreach, and I had determined that I wanted to do a very geographic search. As I mentioned, we live in Dallas, and I was confident that if I searched within the Dallas-Fort Worth, North Texas area, that there would be enough opportunity that I could find a business that would match what I was looking for. I don't think that's probably the case in most metropolitan areas, other than a handful across the country. And certainly a lot of searchers would tell you that you got to widen your geographic area to have more success. We love where we live. We love our house. Just didn't want to move. My wife has a great job. She loves what she does too. And so for us, it was, let's find something where we don't have to relocate. But again, was focusing on broker outreach. And so when I say I officially launched, I had built basically an automated email campaign to about 400 plus brokers, and officially sent that out beginning of January. And that was, really the beginning of my broker outreach. What officially I say kind of launched the outreach search part.
And that list of 400, did you get that from the IBBA website or somewhere?
Yeah, I looked on IBBA, Interexo, Biz by Sell. I just tried to gather as many broker emails, Texas-based brokers, as I could. Not just Dallas-Fort Worth, because I, very much thought that even if somebody's based at Houston, San Antonio, Austin, East Texas, somewhere else, they may have access to or know of other business owners in North Texas. And that was kind of what I found throughout my search, was that, well, I was specifically trying to network with Texas-based brokers. There are a lot of brokerages across the country that work, they cover the entire U.S. And so I would find listings on either Biz by Sell or other brokerage websites, but were listed by some brokerage out of New York or Kansas City or California. And they just happened to be listing this Dallas-based business. And so anytime I would do that, I would just kind of add that name to my list, add that name to my contact list, and ensure that I was following up with them. But initially, it was just Texas-based brokers.
Well, that's a great point, to make sure that when you're building your broker outreach list, that you may want to include people in there, brokers in there who are not based in Texas, but who, for whatever reason, had a Texas listing and might in the future have more. That's great. Shane, before we get too far away from it, I want to circle back to something you said a couple minutes ago. And I've heard this many times before, but I've never asked the follow-up. You heard the advice to reach out to a lot of searchers to make sure that this was in fact the path you wanted to go down. What do you think that piece of advice is about? Is it about like the realities of operating a small business and how it's maybe not as glamorous as somebody from the outside thinks it is? I mean, what did you need? Or I guess maybe just answer it for yourself. What did you learn from networking with searchers, from all these conversations you had, that what concerns did you have about what the search might be, and what allayed those concerns after those conversations?
Yeah, great question. So I think the point is to try to network with folks that have success, and try to glean from them what led to that success, but also try to find folks that didn't have success or are still in the process of searching. You recently had a guest on that has been searching for over a year and is not where they want to be in their search. Trying to network and understand from those folks, because it is a long, long, tough journey. for a lot of folks. I think the average time is between 18 and 24 months, and you have to be prepared to be doing a lot of work on your own, without income, most likely, to survive those 18 to 24 months before you successfully acquire. Thank God for me, it happened much faster than that. And I think that some of the things that I did were part of the reason that it did happen faster. And I was confident going into my search that I could beat those odds of 18 to 24 months. But in speaking with other searchers, you really want to know from both successful and people who have maybe abandoned a search or have maybe even acquired but had a unsuccessful outcome within their acquisition, because there's a lot of risk involved. There's a lot of time and energy and money that go into conducting and executing a search. And it's a lonely, tough path. And so, this person who gave me advice wanted to make sure I was mentally prepared for that and committed to it, because you can't half commit to a search. Or if you half commit to it, you're not going to be as successful, or certainly as successful as quick as you probably want to be.
Mm-hmm. And certainly, I think what you're talking about there is psychological, emotional commitment, but also time commitment. So it's a theme that's come up in recent episodes, and Jordan Carter's whole kind of the angle of his episode was devoted to the fact of full-time versus part-time, and the dramatic difference that makes. And it's not just twice as effective going from, say, 20 hours a week to 40 hours a week. It's much more than that, because there's an accelerant that occurs when you're putting all your time in and can take every call whenever any broker wants to talk, and you just iterate so much faster, more than twice as fast. So, but you didn't have to learn that the hard way. You decided from the outset that you would go in full time. So you've done your broker outreach, or you've started your broker outreach. You've quote unquote launched the search, and so tell us what starts happening in those first few weeks.
Yeah. So listen, there's a lot of searchers out there with some very very excellent tech stacks and different CRM programs and automated email campaigns that you can build. I am not very technically savvy when it comes to that, but I was able to use Mixmax to build just a two email campaign. Probably could have or should have done more than that. But what I did was I sent out two emails to a list of over 400 plus brokers. I also used somebody on Upwork to build a list of kind of intermediaries, CPAs, lawyers, folks that would have clients that are business owners, to try to do kind of a third-party proprietary outreach. And so I kind of sent them the same two email campaign as well, thinking, if I just get one opportunity that's off market from this outreach, then that's worth it.
Sure.
That ultimately did end up proving to be true. I did make a handful of great contacts with financial planners, CPAs, things like that. But ultimately, where I got the most success and most engagement was in the broker side. So, obviously any brokers that would respond via email or book time with me, would call them, would respond to their emails, would book time to speak with them and kind of just explain who I was, what I was looking for. Really just trying to get across the fact that I was a motivated and qualified buyer, and give them the confidence that I'm not somebody who's kicking tires. If I find the right business, I have the ability to close. I'm motivated to close, and I will close. And so again, just was engaging every day with people via email. But as soon as my email campaign finished, I loaded every one of my contacts into HubSpot, and I just created basically a follow-up campaign for myself, and began cold calling anyone who hadn't responded to my email. Just again, trying to let them know who I was, what I was looking for. Obviously, there was a lot of dead conversations that happened, but there was a lot of successful ones as well. And having, the two-pronged attack of email and phone call, I think definitely led to more engagement, because many brokers that I spoke with would say, "Oh, I think I saw an email from you," but they never responded, or they never booked time. But again, that persistence, that follow-up, is I think what led to building better relationships and better engagement with some of the brokers. So, because of the fact that I was cold calling, the broker that ended up listing the business that I bought was not somebody who responded to my email, but he was somebody that I was able to get on the phone. And that's when I first learned about this business.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're gonna get there. But on this broker outreach, so few people pick up the phone now. I imagine, at least searchers. So you probably, even if you hadn't sent those 2 emails prior to doing the cold calling, you probably would have really differentiated yourself by calling. I suspect. I don't know that for sure. But who picks up the phone anymore other than, SaaS salespeople trying to sell you technology, right?
Well, one of the takeaways that I found was that when you're looking on IBBA or one of these, websites with a number of different brokers, is that there are a lot of broker teams, similar to real estate teams, where there's the managing partner or kind of the president, director, and they may have a team of 2, 3, 4, maybe 10 brokers on their team, but they're the name that's listed on that IBBA website. And so when I would email that person and cold call that person, I wasn't going to get through to them. Or if I did, they'd say, I'm not really, I'm leading a team here. I'm running a business. I'm not necessarily out networking with sellers other than maybe a handful of very large clients, but let me get you to somebody on my team. And so that's, where I was able to go beyond the email list and find out, all right, well, Will Smith has his own brokerage, and he's maybe not the person that I should be networking with, but he's got a broker on his team that is the person I should be talking with. And so making those connections, being able to kind of keep track of those notes and understand, all right, well, I have this person here, but it's really a team of people underneath that person that I should be speaking with, also helped kind of just educate me through that process.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it is a sales effort. I mean, that's what salespeople do when they're kind of trying to triangulate to see who the right person to talk to is to, in their case, sell them something. Your case was different motivation, but same mechanics. And Shane, just give us a sense. So you have this list of 400. Give us a sense of how many cold calls you were doing a day. What can you do? 10 or 20?
At least 20, sometimes 30, just depending on the conversations, depending on, if I had already booked time with another broker, with a seller. But I would say on average, probably 20 to 30. And if I didn't get a hold of them, I would, make a note to follow up with them in 2 weeks. If I did get a hold of them, depending on the conversation, either a 2-week follow-up or a month-long follow-up. The other thing that I would do that I think was important is before calling them, I would go to that broker's website or their listings on Biz Buy Sell, and I would try to see what active listings that they had. And I would try to find a listing that they had that might be somewhat interesting to me, because brokers, in my experience, are much more willing to talk to you if you're speaking to them directly about a listing that they have than just trying to say, hey, I'm Shane and I want to buy a business. And so if I could at least, get them talking about that listing to try to learn more information, even if I knew there was about a 95% chance that it wasn't the right listing for me, there are some diamonds in the rough that aren't listed, with all of their best attributes up front. And so, I was always trying to kind of stretch myself to say, don't think this is a business that I want to buy, but let me at least learn about it, because it'll help me build a relationship with the broker. And it'll also just give me a wider experience of looking at a number of different businesses that all have different attributes to them. So because I was looking, I was industry agnostic, I kind of settled on B2B service businesses, which I know a lot of searchers do. That was what my background was in corporate America. So it made sense for me to look into that. But I was really open to pretty much all industries, other than I knew I didn't want to buy a food or restaurant business. I know I didn't really want to do an online business. That just wasn't my expertise or what I felt comfortable. Really, almost anything in between, I was at least going to be willing to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is great, Shane. You had said that you were basically always trying to communicate to the brokers via email, and then when you got them when and if you got them on the phone, that you were somebody they should take seriously, that you weren't a tire kicker, that you had the real intention and capability to close. How did you communicate that?
I would, I had an SBA pre-qualification letter that I would send as part of my email campaign. I would, they would ask sometimes deeper questions about where the funding was going to come from. I would give them direct answers if it required it, where the money was coming from and where I had that money tied up, whether it was in my 401k or investments or savings. I'd also explain that depending on the size of the business, that I felt confident that I could get additional investors. But my goal was to acquire something with 100% equity. I would reiterate the fact that I was full-time searching, that this was a full-time job to me, and that I was very motivated to replace my income. And so I wanted to close quickly. And I was not just going to be doing a bunch of different financial models and learning about these businesses. I wanted to, if I liked the business, I wanted to get in front of the seller quickly. And I wanted as much documentation, financials, or other information that they would provide as quickly as I could, so that I could give them very quick feedback as to whether I wanted to move forward or not.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Excellent. And what did you call yourself? Did you call yourself a searcher, or did you call yourself something else?
I'm sure I probably used the word searcher. I would sometimes get questions whether I was a search fund, and the answer to that was very easily, no, I'm not. I'm not paying for this search myself. I'm not bringing outside investors unless needed, and unless the business that I find requires it. That I am an independent person looking to buy a business, and this is the direction that I want to go. And I've always wanted to be a business owner. And why start a business when you can buy one?
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, so you're a flurry of activity, but very systematic, and you're developing all these, making contact, developing relationships with all these brokers, and you were just about to tell us. So the business that you have acquired, which we're going to learn all about, how did that, from all of this activity, how did that make its way to you?
Yeah. So again, one of the brokers that I had sent an email to was on my list of follow-ups. And I don't remember specifically if I got him on the phone the first time, or if I left a message and one of my follow-ups was able to get him on the phone. But nonetheless, ultimately ended up with him on the phone and just explained who I was and what I was looking for. They asked a few clarifying questions, and he ultimately said, "Hey, I just got this listing. It's a trailer dealership. Is it something that interests you?" I said, "Well, tell me more." And so he basically said, our SIM is not up to date, and I'll get into the reasons why, but I have 2021 financials. He gave me kind of a rough overview, and I said, that sounds great. I just think it's too big for me. I don't think that that business is gonna be able to something that I can afford. And he reiterated, well, due to some specifics about the business, we have realistic expectations, and the owner's motivated and he's flexible. So are you interested? And of course I said, well, yes. I felt as long as I was being upfront and communicating directly that, listen, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste the owner's time. This may not be within my wheelhouse, or I may not have the ability to afford this business. As long as they were still willing to talk to me and work with me, I thought, why not? I'll just keep moving the ball forward and keep learning more about it. So.
Absolutely. And Shane, I think you said your range had been 400 to 750 in cash flow and SDE.
It started at that. By the time I officially started talking to brokers, I had moved that up to 600,000 to $1 million. I had been pre-qualified by an SBA lender that the acquisition lab uses at $2.5 million with my own funds, with plenty of post-closing liquidity. And so I kind of use that as my baseline, is that's what I thought my kind of top end size was going to be. And I thought that, yeah, it would have to be, a pretty favorable multiple, but I could find a business between 600,000 and $1 million up to that size.
So between 600 and $1 million, let's call that 800 in the middle there. And then 800 times a 3x multiple gets you right to your 2.5 million number for the pre-approval. And your range before had just kind of been what felt like you wanted, and then you basically used what the pre-approval turned out to be, which was maybe bigger than you expected, to say, okay, that's my budget. Is that it? Now, is that actually how most searchers do it, where they basically talk to the bank or a lender, and a lender tells them what they can afford?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
What it was for me was that before I really kind of knew what SDE and EBITDA really meant, and really learned how the kind of debt coverage that was going to be required, or the amount of, if I was going to have a leverage buyout with, say, a 90% or 80% SBA loan, how much that eats into the quote unquote earnings of the business. It's not true cash flow to me, the owner, when you're seeing what's represented in EBITDA or earnings. There's obviously a lot of other costs that go into that, most particularly paying down your SBA loan. So initially I thought, hey, 400,000, that's a really good living. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Kind of not realizing that, that's not, after all is said and done and paid for, that only leaves a little bit left for me, assuming the business stays the same. What if the business dips? And so I really just, wanted to give myself more of a cushion so that I could pay myself at least something, and still have, wiggle room to comfortably pay down my debt, and comfortably put necessary investments into the business to help grow it.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell us what salary you were trying to replace?
I would say 200,000 was what I was looking to pay myself.
Great. Okay. So this business is, sounds interesting. It seems too big, but you communicate that transparently to the broker. And he encourages you to keep going. Seller's motivated, seller's, open to negotiation, presumably. What was that first number or set of numbers that you saw that made you say this is too big? How big a business are we talking?
Yeah. So, the business benefited from tremendous tailwinds due to the supply chain issues that occurred as a result of COVID. And it was kind of a confluence of a multitude of different factors. With all the stimulus money that got put into the economy, as we saw with a lot of different consumer goods, demand went through the roof. At the same time, supply chain was choked off, and all the parts became much harder to get. The raw materials became much harder to get. So therefore, inventory became very hard to get. And our manufacturers went from a, say, 4 to 6 week lead time to a 4-month lead time. And so you had this, just basic economic pressure of demands going through the roof, supplies really struggled. And so this business was able to raise their margins. The overall cost of a trailer went up significantly. So just naturally the revenue went up, because obviously, as a trailer dealership, we're passing those, the costs on to our consumers, as is every other competitor of ours. But also just to be able to keep inventory on the lot, the previous owners were able to raise margins pretty significantly. And so the business ended up doing more than double, about 125% of prior year's earnings in 2021. So the business was averaging around 900,000 or so in EBITDA, 18 through 20, and did more than 1.7 in 2021.
Wow. And so the number that they were looking for, I mean, was there a sale price for the business, or did they just give you that EBITDA number and you were like, that's probably too rich for me, no matter what your number is?
Well, so as I'm sure a lot of searches have encountered, it really depends on the brokerage whether there's a listed price. To me, I think it was about 50-50. And so this broker did not have a listed price. And so, anytime there's not a listed price, it's open for negotiation, right? And every broker that I've spoken to handles that very differently. Some of them will be extremely opaque and say, best offer wins, you figure it out. Some of them will give you a little bit more insight as to what helps get a deal done and maybe what the seller's looking for. And this broker was more on that side. And so he would never come right out and say it, give me a specific number to offer, but he kind of gave me a range of what the owners were looking for, and reiterated that there was motivation and they were willing to be flexible. And so those two things, along with my transparency that I would need them to be flexible in order to put together the right deal package, allowed them to continue to work with me. But yeah, seeing that SDE number, I was like, no, I mean, by really almost any multiple, that's quickly going to get outside of my range.
Right. Of course, you could make the argument, which I'm sure you did, that was an aberration. 2021 is everybody, the world was topsy-turvy. A lot of businesses just did so much better than they'd done historically that year, or so much worse, in your case, better. And so, I've seen a lot of people talk about valuing businesses from 2019 and 2018 and leaving out 2021 altogether because it's such an exception. So even if you left out 2021, you still got a great business. I mean, it was still doing $900,000 historically in EBITDA, which is the top of your range. You said you were looking from 600 to $1 million. So right up there at the top of your range. Just beautiful, Shane. So,
yeah.
Okay. So I don't want to take too long. We haven't even got you in the seat yet, but kind of tell us how the actual acquisition and negotiation unfolded.
Well, to touch on that a little bit further, the sellers and the owners were very, and I give a lot of credit to the broker for properly educating the seller in that you can't just take 2021's number, add 5x to it, and expect that that's what you're going to sell for. There was too much uncertainty because of all of those COVID tailwinds that the seller, myself, the broker, really, we didn't have any idea how long any of those tailwinds were going to last and how much that was going to impact 2022, let alone 23 and 24 and so on. And so the broker, you probably almost never see this with any brokerage, but the seller was adamant that when we do a projection for 2022, we're actually going to show between 5 and 10% revenue shrinkage, because we were pretty confident that some of these tailwinds were not going to last all the way through 2022. And so, I think that was very honorable and brave of the seller and the broker to do that and to be upfront about that. Because again, most businesses that have been around this business started in 2007, you don't just more than double your earnings in 1 year without a whole lot of external influences, right? Or in very rare circumstances. And so, luckily we were negotiating on the same plane that 2021 was excellent, but we really don't know whether that can be counted on, or whether we're going to come back a little bit, or how far we're going to come back and kind of revert back to the mean of 18 through 20. So, yeah. So my negotiation, I met with the seller. One of the things I would really encourage this is basic knowledge, I think, but one of the things that I think really helped was when I met the sellers in person, ask a lot of great questions about their business, ask about the origin story, be complimentary, flatter them to an extent that people want to talk about their baby. They want to talk about their business, and especially if it's doing as well as this business was. And so I think just coming in very humbly, building a good rapport very quickly. We met at the office and we went and had a beer afterwards, and just being able to kind of break bread away from the business and build a little bit more of a personal relationship pretty quickly, very much helped with, getting the deal, but also throughout the negotiation, throughout the transition. I have the utmost respect for the sellers. We built a great relationship. There's still an ongoing relationship. They still own the property, so still paying rent to the sellers. And that will be an ongoing relationship for a while, as well as some seller notes. So kind of getting into my negotiation, the seller or the seller's broker was he was very much a part of that. He brought in 2 different lenders that he had a lot of confidence in, even though I had already networked and met with a couple of different lenders on my own. And he wanted me to speak to them because he really wanted them to do a hard look at my finances and put together a deal structure that they knew confidently was going to get SBA approved. He did not want to sign an LOI with me if the bankers could not provide reasonable confidence, or I should say a very high level of confidence, that they could actually close this business with our deal structure. And so I put together an LOI. They ultimately did not accept the first LOI, came back to me with a number of different red lines and some different points on deal structure. And we actually went to lunch, me and the seller's broker and one of the bankers, and probably sat there for 2 hours talking about different deal structures that the bank would be happy with, that the seller would be happy with, and that we thought we could close with. And so we ultimately landed on a change from an asset purchase to a stock purchase because of the tax benefits to the seller. That was something that the seller was motivated by. I was willing at that point to take on the risk that comes with the stock purchase, because I thought the upside of this business was worth it. And that also helped create a structure that was more accessible to me, or that we could make work for both parties.
Shane, so you meet with the seller twice. You do the first kind of getting to know you, and then go into the office, and it turns out to be a beer. When did you meet for that first meeting?
We actually had a conference call at the end of January, and then the next week met in person.
But where was that in the process of getting the listing, talking to the broker?
So I first spoke with the broker at the end of January. That week, set up a conference call. So I've officially launched January 1st. Within the first month, I'm speaking to the broker, and ultimately have my first call with the owner within the month of January. Again, a week later, we meet in person. Less than a week later, I had my LOI in their hands. And for the next 3 weeks was when we kind of went through that LOI negotiation phase.
So from the broker, you have a conference call with the seller, and then the seller, that conference call goes well. And he says, why don't you come out? Let's meet in person. Come see the business.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, and then the second meeting, after you've submitted your LOI that they've redlined, and you all get together to hammer out a deal, that must have been a high anxiety moment for you. I mean, that was a fateful couple of hours in your life.
It was. I had already been given some strong indications that the sellers liked me, that they wanted to make a deal work with me, that the broker was confident enough in me, but he needed to hear it from the lenders. He really needed that assurity from the lenders that we would actually be able to close. Because meanwhile, so at the end of January, this deal is not on the market. The reason being is that the sellers had originally worked with a different brokerage that didn't handle the listing very well. They ended up kicking it to this other affiliate brokerage, which is where the broker that I spoke with ends up taking the ball and running with it. Basically, as soon as he gets the listing, is I think within the same week is when we had our conversation. So it just happened to be, I don't want to say luck, but the right timing that I was speaking to him, because he had just gotten this listing. It's fresh. They hadn't updated their SIM. The SIM was 2 years old. They hadn't put it on Biz Buy Sell quite yet. But meanwhile, from the time that we have our first conversation to the time we ultimately are under LOI, the listing goes up on Biz Buy Sell. There's getting multiple, a lot of interested buyers. There was even some other LOIs that were submitted. And so, luckily again, made the right impressions on the seller, that they were motivated to work with me so that we could go through that longer process of actually getting the LOI agreed to.
And yeah, so you're sitting around the table with these folks negotiating with your seller and, his broker and a lender. You said it was the 4 of you?
Not the seller, just the seller's broker, but the lender, the seller's broker, and I.
Okay. Knowing also that, you were ahead of the curve on this business, but that in fact, the broker is doing his job. He's going to put it back on biz buy sell. Other LOIs are going to come in. Being a searcher who's done your homework, that $900,000, looking back now, putting aside 2021, but a business that's regularly generating $900,000 in cash flow is going to be very desirable to a lot of people. So you don't want this one to slip through your fingers. And just a little bit more color on what you had said, this kind of history you said, Shane, there was a 2-year-old sim, so they had tried to sell the business 2 years prior. A little bit more color there.
Yeah. So they had, I'm not going to name the brokerage, but they had gone through a very well-known large brokerage, and ultimately, had decided that they were ready to start trying to sell the business. I think at that point, they didn't really expect the process to happen very quickly, but they at least wanted to get it out to market, see what kind of offers, at that time they could have got. From what I was told from the sellers, the broker just didn't do their job. They just didn't work very hard. They didn't really market it. And it kind of just sat there. This was, I think, in 2019. So keep in mind now, March of 2020 is when COVID officially hits. And a lot of things are up in the air for the business. They ended up shutting down for 6 weeks completely, still paid our employees through that time. So there was a lot of uncertainty around what was going to happen. And certainly, I don't think anyone could have predicted that the business ultimately would have done significantly better as a result of the pandemic, in those first early months. And so that obviously took their time and attention was to navigate the business through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So they were frustrated, presumably, by this brokerage that really didn't do much for them. On the other hand, it was a blessing in disguise because they got to enjoy all of the additional profits that came in through 2021. Shane, we haven't even said what the business does. I should have asked you that about 40 minutes ago. Tell us what we've touched on it, trailer dealership, but give us more.
Yeah, so it's North Texas Trailers. We're a trailer dealership, a fully independent trailer dealership in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We have 3 locations in Fort Worth, Louisville, and McKinney, which are Fort Worth's obviously a large part of the Metroplex. Louisville and McKinney are kind of northern suburbs of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. We sell new trailers. We do service and repair work on trailers, and we sell trailer parts. So basically anything that a traditional car dealership does, we do, but exclusively for trailers, and specifically cargo and utility trailers are kind of our bread and butter. We also do flatbeds, equipment haulers, car haulers, dump trailers, basically anything you can tow with a pickup.
Mm-hmm. But even though it's just a pickup, you're mostly selling to other business people, not consumers.
Yes, for the most part. And, it's like when you buy a new car or you all of a sudden have a new job, you start to notice things that are in your surroundings that you never noticed before. I've been on Dallas highways for a number of years and had no idea that there were that many trailers on the road. Now it's all I see. And Dallas-Fort Worth is the number 1 area in the country for trailers. And there's a lot of very large manufacturers within the area, within a 2-hour drive of Dallas-Fort Worth, particularly out in Waco and in East Texas. So it is a hotbed for the trailer business.
And so is that a competitive advantage? I mean, is that part of the reason why your business has been successful, because it happens to be in the Mecca?
Well, there's also a lot of competition. Probably more competitors in Dallas-Fort Worth than there are in probably anywhere else in the country. But we get a lot of the economic type kind of tailwinds. And one of the things that really helped make me comfortable with this business was that I was going to school at the time, but I lived in Dallas-Fort Worth during the recession of 2008, 2009. And Dallas-Fort Worth certainly had, like all areas of the country, was impacted, but had a lot more isolation than I think other parts of the country. And so, if you look at I don't know off the top of my head, but if you just look at our our residential populace and how much it's grown over the last 20 years and kind of what the future projections are, more and more people are going to continue to move to Texas. They're going to continue to move to North Texas. The Metroplex is going to continue to expand outwards. And while we're not directly related to the construction business, we support a lot of kind of customers that are around the construction business. And so I felt very confident that this is an area that will continue to have those economic tailwinds support it. And, the future is bright. So even though it's a hotbed of competition, there's still a lot of positive trends that will help propel our business.
And when you say dealership, so I don't know that I've ever seen a trailer dealership, but like you said, I probably have and didn't notice, and now I'll look for them and see them everywhere. But does a trailer dealership, do you have a lot with trailers out on the lot for shoppers to come look at? Does it look like a car dealership except, presumably a smaller footprint and trailers instead of cars out front?
It does. I would say that it's definitely not as professional as, not glass walls and, fancy cars in the showroom. But yeah, it's very much like that. One of the things that also made me very confident about this business is that there's a handful of very large national dealer brands. Big Tech's most notably is the biggest one in the industry. There's a number of others. And so I looked at all of our competition in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, at least just kind of Googling. And, there's a handful of, like I said, of very large national manufacturers, and they come with all of the size and infrastructure that you would assume that a company of that size does. But when you get a little bit below our size of business, you start to get into that used car lot, basically, but except a trailer lot. It's a guy with a shed and a little tiny lot, and he's got a handful of trailers, and there's no website, there's a phone number. They're not doing service, they're not doing parts, they don't have rentals like we do. So there's a lot of competitors out there that are just your mom and pop little trailer yards that I don't really feel like we compete with. And so that gave me a lot of confidence that we were well positioned within the market. We're not one of the big national players, but we are, with 3 locations, with the number of trailers that we're moving and having service parts and rentals, we're offering a lot more to our consumers than kind of your lower end trailer yard, if you will.
Sure. And so what's the size of the business in terms of people and employees?
There are 19 employees, including myself. We run pretty lean and mean, so I'm looking to kind of add to and expand our headcount and take a little bit of non-selling activities off of my sales folks' plates and just better support them, so we can be a little bit more strategic about how we engage with our consumers and building out our sales pipeline.
And so is sales a lot of kind of what the business does? You service, of course, you got people doing the service of trailers, so for that service revenue, but is actually selling trailers like the kind of the core offering of the business?
It's the largest part of our revenue. It's about 2/3 of our revenue. But it's only, it's just like a car dealership. It's not the most profitable part of the business. And so the way I kind of look at it is we sell new trailers so that when those customers, when something breaks on their trailer, they bring it back to us to service it. Because really service and parts is, the more profitable part of the business, and an area that I think we can continue to expand on and do to get better at. But yeah, sales is the number one revenue driver for sure.
And how much does your average or median trailer cost? I know I'm sure there's a wide variety, but give us just a ballpark here.
Yeah, so trailer costs on average have gone up about 40% since the pandemic. So what used to cost $3,000 is now $5,000. And so that new median price is much higher than it would have been 3 years ago. But I would say on average is going to be $8,000 to $9,000. We sell trailers as little as $2,500 and as much as $50,000.
Wow. Okay. But 8,000 or 9,000. And in 2022, so how is it shaping up compared to your projections and compared to 2021, that whole conversation. We're almost at the end of the year here. What happened?
Yeah, so I'm very pleased to say that the business is doing great. We are essentially exactly flat year to date on sales. So we have not grown, but we did not have the 5 to 10% reduction that we thought we might. Our service revenue has grown 15%, and our sales revenue has dropped about 6%. So overall, service is making up for the drop in sales. I think as we close out the year, we're at this new crossroads economically where all of our manufacturers have caught up. The supply chains have been opened up, but at the same time, demand is starting to come down. And so we're kind of the inverse of where we were 2 years ago, where we have more inventory and our manufacturers have more inventory with a little less demand. So I foresee some challenges and a bumpy road ahead on the new sales side, but that's where our service revenue growth really gives me encouragement, and I'll continue to help prop up the business until we can get back to maybe more of a little bit of a normalized sales pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, Shane. And just going back to when you evaluated this business, I was so focused on that big $900,000 or $1.7 million in 2021, that earnings number. But what else about the business did you like? And what value did you envision adding? What was your vision for your ownership of this business?
I'm sure you've had a lot of guests say this, but number one, I had a lot of trust with the sellers. I felt very confident in the business they had built. Everything that they showed me, that they told me, has aired out to be true. There was no snakes under rocks that I had to uncover. And so I felt very confident that in the business that they had built and in the priorities that they had built it upon. I really like that we are diversified. We have 3 locations. So we're not just dependent on one location and the traffic of one area. We're covering 3 important parts of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We have a lot of employee loyalty. Our average employee has been here probably 8 years. And so that gives me a ton of confidence knowing that we have a strong team culture. We have a lot of loyalty with our team members, and they do excellent. I've been so impressed with all of them through this transition. It really has been about as good of a transition as I could have hoped for. That's not to say that there weren't issues and that employees don't come with their own challenges from time to time, but so those were a lot of the things that gave me confidence and made me attracted to this business.
So it sounds like you were attracted to it because it felt like a very high quality business in a market that had nice tailwinds. But you didn't have some hugely aggressive growth strategy yet. I mean, with a solid business in an industry with tailwinds, presumably there will be growth opportunities, but you weren't like, I'm going to grow through acquisition, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z right when I get in there, or I'm going to, redo the website, or all of that. It was more like you're taking control of a great business, and that was kind of like, check that box, and the rest you'll see.
Yeah. So two other things. There's literally very little customer concentration, if any. 2021, the largest customer represented 1% of revenue. So we are very well diversified with a large customer base. That was very, very attractive, which obviously, that can be a concern with a lot of small businesses. And one other thing that I kind of failed to mention was that the owner had built out an e-commerce storefront prior to 2021. He had worked through the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022 to get this e-commerce storefront up and running, where we sell parts online. And obviously, with the growth of e-commerce, I saw that as a natural, huge growth opportunity.
Yeah.
4 months into owning this business, I still feel as though that is a great growth opportunity. I haven't dedicated the time or energy or money yet to really making it what it needs to be successful, just because there's a lot of other foundational work that I want to establish within the parts of our business that are already revenue generating before I really kind of pour the money and time and energy into the e-commerce that I know needs to be put into it in order for it to be successful.
Wow. Yeah. But what an enticing prospect to just have there waiting for you when you can turn your attention and resources to it. That'll be great. Shane, I still have a bunch of questions for you. So I want to move here. I want to go back to your just acquisition for a sec. You had said something that I glossed over, but I wanted to give it a little attention. The stock sale versus asset sale. You elaborate on that a little bit more. What the risks are traditionally, and why so many acquisition entrepreneurs prefer and do asset sales, and why sellers often prefer a stock sale. And in this case, the seller really pushed you on that, and you were willing to do that, unlike so many acquisition entrepreneurs. So please have at it on the question of stock versus asset sale.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm not a tax authority, but as I understand it, and I don't know what the specifics are, but there are significant tax advantages for a seller by executing a stock purchase, because the majority of the purchase is taxed as capital gains, which obviously comes at a lower tax rate, versus the way that the asset allocation works when you execute an asset purchase. And so that was obviously very attractive to the seller. Traditionally, in an asset versus stock sale, because the seller is gaining the tax advantages, traditionally you can have a little bit of a lower purchase price, and the net to the seller is going to be the same or similar. And the risk and the reason that they're so very, not very oftenly done, is that you inherit all of the previous liabilities of the business for the entire time it's been around. When you execute a stock purchase, you're buying membership interest into that entity, that company. We're an LLC, and so I bought 100% of the membership interest in North Texas Trailers. But with that, anything that happened prior to closing, I'm now responsible for any type of liability. Now we have, as every purchase agreement has, there's indemnification and there's limits and things like that that help guide that, but you do expose yourself to that. Now, obviously, in an asset purchase, if something catastrophic happens prior to closing, well, it can affect your brand name legally, because you created a new entity, you bought the assets of that entity and brought it into your new one. Legally, you're not on the hook for prior liabilities. With the stock purchase, you are. So that's the number one downside. And it's a very real downside. I'll share that a day before we closed on the business, there was a lawsuit served. I'm confident that we're in the right on. It's kind of the basic slip, trip, and fall, and that's what we have insurance for. And I believe did a lot of the things right. But this occurred in 2020. June 2nd of 2022 was when the lawsuit was served, and we closed on June 3rd. So I'm now responsible for that. I wasn't working here in 2020.
That's such a perfect example of why this is dicey. I mean, literally a day before close, and now you've inherited this lawsuit. But go ahead.
But again, going back to that initial LOI negotiation, I wanted to avoid a stock purchase because it was what I was taught was for all these additional liability reasons. But once the seller had kind of made up their mind that this is what they wanted, again, I thought it was too good of a business not to buy, just for the sake of executing an asset purchase versus a stock purchase.
Great. Okay. And can you tell us what the acquisition price ended up being and kind of the structure of the deal?
It was $4 million, 80% SBA loan, 10% seller note, an additional 5% seller note on full standby, and 5% buyer's equity. The 5% full standby note allows the SBA to view that money as part of the buyer's equity injection to get to that minimum 10% or 10% buyer equity injection, which the SBA requires. And so, that was our structure.
And explain to folks what full standby means exactly.
It means that the seller is agreeing that that seller note will not be paid at all until the SBA loan is paid in full. And And so that's what we've agreed to in writing. What we've agreed to via handshake may be something different, but what we've agreed to in writing, and as far as the bank is concerned, is that the seller note will not be touched or paid until the SBA loan is paid in full.
Okay. And so you did not have to go to go with outside investors.
I did not. Well, I did in the end. My father helped me out with some money that we agreed I would pay back within 18 months, and I'm happy to share paid it back within 4 months. But the reason for that was that I was looking at doing a Rob's transaction, which I was equipped to do, had the finances in order to do it, to fulfill this structure. But after a lot of advice from financial individuals, CPAs, and lawyers, ultimately avoided the Rob structure. Basically kind of the overarching guidance I was given is that if it's the only way you can purchase a business, then it's worth it. But if you can avoid it, do so, because there's just a lot of rigidity that comes with that structure, a lot less flexibility that you have down the road. You have to be a C corp. There's just a lot of other things that come along with executing a Rob's transaction. And so I was prepared to liquidate my 401k and pay the taxes and penalties to do so, but ultimately was able to get some help from my father to make that happen without having to kind of pay taxes and penalties.
Penalties, yeah.
It's not really worth it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Shane. That's phenomenal. Fast forwarding back now to you being in the seat. So just give us a little bit on day one. You said the transition has been as smooth as you could have hoped for. But paint a picture for us when you come in and the announcement is made.
Yeah. So interesting first day. We had all the employees, which doesn't happen very rarely, very often, because we have 3 locations and they're all about 30 minutes apart. We had all the locations come to one central location on a Saturday morning, and the owners, this was the first time any of the employees knew that the business was for sale. And here I walk in and they're like, "Hey, this is Shane, and he's bought the business." A little bit more of an intro and background into me, but it gave me an opportunity to address all of the employees and kind of just talk about who I was, what the goals were, and really reiterate that no big changes were going to happen. And kind of what I worked with was that you can expect change in the future. There's not going to be any major changes for 90 days. I'm going to work with all of you and really try to observe all of you in your work habits as much as I can to understand what your needs are, what roadblocks you have, what are some things that I can help make easier within this business. But I'm not making any major changes for the first 90 days. And then we had to do a physical count of all of our parts inventory and all of our trailer inventory, and actually do a full-blown hand count, which we have over about $200,000 worth of trailer parts inventory. Some things as little as 5-cent bolts, and some things as much as a couple $1,000 axles. But we had hand count every single one of them to provide a true up of our working capital. What was estimated that was going to be transferred at the time of sale versus what was actually transferred at the time of sale. And so that was a pretty tedious task to do on day one with all of the employees. And we actually closed to the public to make that happen. But, it was necessary as part of our transition. So,
Shane, you mentioned that you were at some point in your previous job managing 750 people, or had 750 people under you. So that's a lot of management experience, presumably. How do you find that has helped inform being the CEO of a small business, or are they such different animals that not so much? Talk to me about kind of your experience as a manager, and talk to people out there who might not have the same experience that you did of 750 people under you, and what they can expect as manager of a small business, as CEO of a small business.
Yeah, good question. So, the company I worked at had over 250,000 employees. So it was a very, very large organization. With that comes a lot of nuanced corporate structure, which we obviously do not have in a 19-person organization. So the environment and the structure in which I lead and manage is very different. But absolutely, the experience is 100% helped. I think anytime that you have leadership and management experience where you've dealt with conflict, you've dealt with unhappy employees, maybe unhappy customers, you've dealt with, you've had to make decisions, stand by and live with those decisions. In a corporate environment, unfortunately, we made decisions as a company that oftentimes I didn't agree with, but that I had to execute upon and deliver, when it was terminating or laying off employees or making some sort of other changes within the business. But you learn how to talk through that. You learn how to relate that as best you can to employees. And so, there will continue to be, employees that have conflict with each other, maybe have conflict with me, have conflict with the customer. A lot of those types of situations I've seen before. I've obviously made mistakes in managing those situations in the past, and I'm hoping to, learn from those decisions and make better ones moving forward. But the big difference in what I'm doing today versus what I did in the past is really more about making bigger decisions that affect all parts of the business and also being responsible for all parts of the business. I was an operations leader, and we did a lot hand in hand with sales. We did a lot hand in hand with finance and HR. But now all of that falls on me. All umbrellas fall on me and my team. And so just having the flexibility to work within all different parts of the business and understanding that I might be making a sales related decision at 10 a.m. and then I'm having to make an HR related decision at 10:30 and a finance related decision within the next few minutes. And it all just kind of combines into one role as the leader of the business.
Mm-hmm. And is it what you expected being the leader of the business? Do you like this new feel?
I love it. I don't know how I didn't do this sooner. It's been, but that being said, everything happens for a reason. I was able to do my search because of the situation that I was in, and but I absolutely love it. Like I said, it doesn't mean that there's not hardships and struggles that come with it, and navigating difficult situations and having the stress related to being the ultimate decision maker and being responsible for these other employees' livelihoods. But it's a great feeling. It comes with a lot of flexibility. I have a great team around me, and I think that's really the key to any successful business, no matter the size, is having a great team around you. But yeah, I'm loving it so far.
That's great. Shane, last question for you. So you found a business that does between $900,000 and $1.7 million in earnings in SDE a year. Really a bigger business than most searchers are able to acquire or can even find, much as they'd love to. And you did it in 6 months. You got into a lot of detail on your process, your broker outreach. Thank you for that. That was really educational. Would you say that it was thanks to that broker outreach that you were so successful in your search and it happened so quickly? Or it was luck, or it's just a classic story of like increase your chances to be lucky, and then more luck will come your way, sort of thing. I'm just trying to understand if there's a lesson to be extracted from your very positive search experience.
I think number one for me, it was the fact that I was full time, that I felt the responsibility to make up our income that was going to be lost with me having lost my job. And so that you can't fake that motivation. You can't probably have that motivation if you're still earning an income and you're still, tied to your job. Doesn't mean I don't think you can be successful as a searcher. I think there's a lot of people that find the ways to do that and manage their time successfully. But I don't know that you could fake that I don't want to say desperation, but that motivation and that willingness to put in the work to make it happen. I think
You burned the boats. It was a classic burn the boats situation.
100%. And like I said, I got this seller's broker on the phone because I was cold calling. That worked for me. It's not a guarantee it's going to work for everyone, but I certainly don't think it can hurt. I think you had Doug Jones on recently. He talked about by the fifth, sixth, seventh time he's spoken to these brokers, he's now finally built a rapport. That doesn't happen without that persistence or he finally was able to kind of get knocked down the door. And other searchers, the same thing. You have to make multiple contacts with these buyers. They're not just from these sellers, these brokers, or business owners. They're not just going to take you seriously right from the get-go for one or two emails. You got to continue to follow up. And so, I attribute a lot of that to the success and right place, right time. It just kind of worked the way it did.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Well, as I said, your process was great to hear your process. I think there's a lot of value in it. Clearly, Shane, how can people reach you? What's the best way if they want to get in touch?
Yeah, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people trying to sell me stuff on LinkedIn and reach out via that way. But you can reach me at Shane Ehrsam, EHRSAM. You can also reach me via email at shane@ntxtrailers.com.
And ntxtrailers.com obviously is also the URL everyone should check out to see North Texas trailers.
Yes, absolutely. And if I can, just one last plug for the Acquisition Lab. It really helps build my success. Not only that, once I was through with my cohort, just having advisors, having other cohorts, the other members of the lab to reach out to at all hours through our Slack and through our different advisor hours. There were so many different points from negotiating that LOI to day before closing, getting a lawsuit served, that I was able to reach out to both our advisors and the people within the lab and gain advice and gain guidance. And it really helped propel me along my search. So.
And just to be clear, everyone, yes, the Acquisition Lab is a sponsor of Acquiring Minds, but Shane and I found each other separately. I think I saw Shane's announcement on Search Funder, and that's why we're talking, not because a sponsor put him in the seat here, but
absolutely.
It dovetails beautifully. I too went through the Acquisition Lab and found it enormously valuable. So I'm happy to have you say all that. Thank you very much for coming on, Shane. Thank you very much for being so transparent, particularly about the numbers. And look forward to having you back and hearing how things have gone with North Texas Trailers.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Will. Appreciate it.